Welcome, everyone, to episode 10 of the Umana Yana podcast. I'm your host, Josh Dripal, and today we are joined by a very special guest. His name is Brendan Morrison, and he's here to I have actually just sent on over an invite to Brendan for him to join our conversation today, and once he does, we're going to get going. I want to thank everyone who always takes the time to join us for these conversations. These are very much for the whole community, not just me and my guest. We like to really dive into those conversations that you might not hear every day, right? We might have some feelings around, oh, is that okay for me to talk about? And, the purpose of this podcast is for us to actually talk about it all. We try something different, as my saying goes. And this is a chance for us all to really just elevate our voices. We all bring different gifts to the universe, and this gives us a chance to see that, our medicine has value. There are people who can receive messages from absolutely anything that we say, things that we do. So we just need to give ourselves an opportunity to actually share that. And when we do that, we find greater connections. So I see that Brendan has joined, and hopefully he can jump in on the conversation and we can get going. Brendan, I see your request here. I'm accepting that. There we go. Oh, it's not that kind of live stream, bro.
How's it going?
Good, man. How are you?
Good.
We have solid internet this time.
Yes. Yeah. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, for those who don't know, Brendan and I tried to do this episode one time before, and we actually had some of the storm that's going through Costa Rica knocked out the internet, so that was quite choppy, and we decided let's get together again and do this properly. So, thank you everyone for joining us today. Brendan, as you were joining, I did introduce all of our listeners to today's topic, which is around Stoicism, mental health, and masculinity. So thank you so much for joining me today, man. How's your day been going?
Been pretty good. It's been a nice and chill day. I didn't work too much, so yeah, I'm just kind of relaxing and looking forward to this. How about you?
Awesome. Yeah, it's been a really good day. I got some work done on a project that we're working on in Costa Rica out here. So we had a solid like three-hour productive meeting this morning. Got a little gym in, did a podcast, and here I am for the second one for today. So feeling really good about it, man. Yeah. So before we jump in, one thing I want to ask you before you introduce yourself is what's something that you're grateful for today, Brendan?
The rain, it just started thunderstorming here like maybe 10 minutes ago,
Yeah.
and I feel like it's been a minute, and so I was just outside in the rain, and it's a nice, refreshing thing. It's been sunny and beautiful here, but the rain is also appreciated.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, man.
Yeah.
So in the usual fashion that we do on the Umana Yana podcast, I like to kick it over to our guests for the day to introduce themselves as they see fit. And the reason for that is because oftentimes, we can Google one another, we can look at a link in a bio, and we can ramble on about, say, 20 different titles or acronyms. And, the individual might not necessarily lead with that when they talk about themselves. So I always like to kick it over to the guests to introduce themselves. So Brendan, what do you have for us today?
I don't have any of those 20 acronyms or any of that type of stuff. Honestly, I don't know. I'm myself. I am in my mid-30s. I have a amazing girlfriend. I own a small construction company. Um, I, s- I enjoy the outdoors. I enjoy being close to the lake. I enjoy traveling and kind of seeing new places, meeting new people and new experiences. Um, I like to meditate, yoga, work out, like mountain bike. Yeah, I don't really know how to introduce myself other than I am who I am.
Love it.
And I guess what we're here to talk about is just like that process, so to speak, right? Like, how do you become who you are and the bits and pieces you go through as a human as you evolve, hopefully, and, become more into who you are.
Definitely. I appreciate that, man. I appreciate the candid introduction. And, I love how you did it because it wasn't relying on a title. It wasn't relying on an accolade per se. It's I'm Brendan, so, I like that energy, man. So thank you for showing up with that. We connected during June, and June was Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. So we were really focusing our energy and attention on that topic, and how we participated in that, how it's impacted us, how even our mindset has evolved around mental health over the course of our life. right? So, I'm curious for you, did the month represent an opportunity for you to raise awareness that you don't do outside of June? Or, what did you see in that month?
Um, I didn't do a lot of necessarily raising awareness outside of what is my normal day-to-day practices. Like I try to stay connected with friends and check in with guys and see how they're doing. I appreciate when they do the same. Um, the month of June was busy. I was working lots. It was hot. Um, I got away at the end of June for a little bit of traveling, which was nice. Um, yeah, no, nothing particularly mental health focus per se. I think
Yeah.
just living life and trying to enjoy and balance all of the different aspects of it.
I love it. And even that in itself is a way to be raising that awareness, right? We just embody some of those things, the balance, the expressions of joy, doing things that really feel aligned with our soul and our purpose. So I think you showing up as yourself and making sure that you take care of yourself first and foremost, I think that in itself is a great way to acknowledge and honor what the whole month was about. And, also provide a bit of an example for how we can live every day outside of that month as well. Right. I think that for me, something that has been missing, from my experiences, I haven't really seen the embodiment of it, from the men around me. So I think that, having someone like yourself in my ecosystem, getting to see you show up and make sure you take time for those personal practices, be it meditation or being outside, a little bit of time to rest and relax and enjoy nature, all of those things are incredibly important. And, sometimes it doesn't really take us standing with a mic and saying, hey guys, this is the lesson for today. Sometimes it really is just showing up as we are, as this evolved version of ourselves, and allowing all of that to be seen by the people around us. So I think that in itself was really great, man.
Yeah, showing up as myself is not an easy thing all the time. It's a constant effort and learning thing, and I don't know, it's where I'm at.
Yeah, absolutely, man. No, totally. Something that's a big one for us, and I know we dabbled in this when we had our retreat together and whatnot, but it's something that's kind of just live, kind of every day, is emotion. And when the topic of emotions comes up, I affectionately try to drop in there the F word, and the F word I'm referring to is feelings, right? I find that we're more likely to actually drop the F word than to actually refer to the word feelings. And, there seems to be a little bit of, ongoing walls that we keep building up around this word. So, I'm curious, talk to me about your experience when it comes to bringing these topics up and even being on the receiving end of questions around your feelings and how that's kind of evolved for you over time.
um, I think it's pretty important to start with evolved would be, I feel like it's gone leaps and bounds. I think for most of my life, I swore all the fucking time, but I would never talk about my feelings or any of that. I used, I would run from anything that was uncomfortable, essentially,
Right.
um, and just try to get through day to day, minute to minute, week to week, without paying too much attention to what was happening inside me or how I was showing up as a result of that, per se. Um, the first step to talking about your feelings or your emotions or any of that type of stuff, which is still weird and I don't think needs to be like, I don't know what the word's escaping me, but I feel like there's definitely stigmatism about talking about it, and
Yeah.
there is a lot of apprehension, but at the end of the day, we're all going through things, and if you can just accept that, like, I'm going through something and you're going through something, most of the time we can find similarities and we can find differences and help each other out. And as a result of that, you get to usually feel a little bit more connected, a little bit more happy, joyful, free. Um, that's kind of where I'm at with it. I mean, the first start to feeling anything is actually feeling it and allowing yourself to feel whatever is feeling, which for me involves slowing down. You can run from whatever you want. When you stop, you're going to start feeling uncomfortable while everything you run from comes up.
Yeah.
Uh, and so that is something that I find in meditation, in being in nature, is those moments to slow down, to tap in, to connect, and really see what's going on for me. And that allows me, like that informs me on what is missing in my life, what is overwhelming me, what is challenging me, and what is making me feel alive and inspired. Like all of those things come from as a result of actually going like, hey, how do I feel about this?
Yeah.
For me, that actually allows me to live now versus run and go through the motions of living. And I say that, and that is a practice. That is not a perfect thing. That is not what every day of my life looks like. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, man. And it's interesting because when it comes to feelings and expressing emotions and whatnot, something that the research really hints at and lived experience is that when it comes to feelings, we're rather limited as men, in the vocabulary that we access to express what we're feeling, right? Oftentimes, what comes up is that we have words to describe basically anger and rage, right? Maybe sadness if we're lucky, right? So we don't really have that full spectrum where we're talking, so we can actually fully communicate, all of these things are really live for me right now. This is how I'm feeling as a result of this, which is making me feel this way. And now I'm feeling like this, and so, I feel that there's a lot of work that we can do that's really tied to our empowerment with knowledge, with words, right? To actually connect with these things and understand, okay, so if I'm feeling a little bit nervous, that's okay. But what's underlying me feeling nervous? Okay, so now I understand in moments when I might feel nervous, right? And something else that I think would be really valuable for us as men to do when it comes to getting more comfortable with feelings and emotions and things that are going on within our body is actually something that I've been incredibly curious about for a long time, which is actually looking at the emotional pain centers in our body, right? So, for example, there's a school of thought that believes, like, for example, if I have pain in my left forearm, right, that is tied to a certain trauma that's still within my body that I've experienced, right? There's certain times when it's like, oh man, my right shoulder really is hurting me quite a bit right now. What's that tied into? That's tied into some unresolved, trauma that happened with the masculine energy, right? So there's a lot of these cues and clues that we can pick up on if we get curious and allow ourselves to really tap into, for example, what our body's trying to show us, right? And, choosing to slow down can sometimes be the fastest way to get to where we're going because we can actually tap into what's actually happening to me right now and how do I champion that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a whole world of metaphysical, alignments and different theories and thought processes and kind of where it all comes from and how the body, like the somatics of the body and the brain and your history are tied together.
Yeah.
And some of them super interest me, and I think there's weight to them. I also have dived into the path of wanting to understand and, from a mind perspective, know and be able to link A plus B equals C thing for why something is coming up within me.
Right.
And that's a helpful practice, but it can also just be another way of escaping it all. You're intellectualizing everything and not actually dealing with like the fact that it's here.
Right.
One of the practices I'm spending a little bit more time on is just like allowing whatever to be and not trying to figure out exactly why it's all there right away. Because for me, I can spend a lot of time reacting and respond. I call it responding, but it's still a reaction to what is ever happening in me. And sometimes the best course of action is just to allow it to happen. And then it'll rise and it'll fall, and then I can move forward, with what actually serves me and not from this place, so to speak.
Yeah.
I guess I kind of just rounded us into Stoicism a little bit because that's one definition of it. Like, so
Yeah.
that is one way to look at it. And
For sure.
I'm not a master of Stoicism by any means. You can tell how I am feeling usually by looking at me.
Mhm.
That classic Stoic idea of, no matter what's happening, what's going on, there's no change in my demeanor, is not something I am a master of. Um, I think there's something to Stoicism that is often misguided, is you're not supposed to feel anything. You're not supposed to have any of this.
Yeah.
Where it's actually just not responding from there, not allowing my anger, or my fear, or my sadness to drive all of my decision making. And I can make decisions from a place of calm centeredness and respond to situations in the way that, I best see fit, and I will
Yeah.
be respectful and proud of later on, versus I was angry in the moment, because there's nothing worse than having to go to somebody after something and go, I was a dick here,
Yeah.
or this was all fear and I'm sorry that this came up. Like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
if you that moment of pause, I've found that for me, I'm usually a little happier and proud of the actions I've taken.
Yeah, no, that's a really, really great point, man. And like you touched on something that I think is also crucial, and maybe just an opportunity for us to impart something on, those who have tuned in for the conversation with us today. Just helping to explain how you distinguish between reacting and responding, because this is actually a major shift that made a world of difference for me as well. To understand that there's a distinction between the two. And, there's one way that's probably for my highest good, and there's another way that's probably going to lead to me having to do a little bit extra cleanup when this is all said and done. So how would you go about explaining the difference between reacting and responding, and how that's positively benefited you to distinguish between the two?
That's a great question.
Thank you.
I wish I had a perfect answer, but I don't. I'm still learning it, to be honest.
Yeah.
What I would say is, when I'm reacting, I'm often not feeling grounded. I'm not feeling calm. I'm feeling reactive, to be honest. Like, I'm boiling over.
Mm.
And there is very little consideration for outside of what I'm feeling.
That's so great. Yeah.
And when I'm responding, it takes me a little longer to say something. It takes me a check in with, my heart, with my mind, and with the ground beneath me, to, like, okay, yes, this feeling is here. These emotions are here. What else is there? Like, what other perspectives and parts are here? Um, and how do I want to, how do I best want to show up in this? Because I might be angry, but if I tear a strip off of somebody, is that how I want to show up? No. Is it better to maybe be curious and be like, what were you thinking? Like, how did we get here? Did I miscommunicate something? How do
Mm.
we come to a solution? How do we move forward? I think that would be an example of it. Again, practice. Yeah, I'm new to this side of things, and I'm always hesitant to people that tell me they have things figured out.
Mm-hmm.
And I have made progress in my life, but I do not have things figured out. And I'd be wary of somebody who says they do. But that's just my own, maybe, paranoia, so to speak.
I hear you, man. We're all here to figure it out. That's why we're all still here, right? And
Yeah.
hey, I think you did a 10 out of 10 job on explaining the difference between react and respond. Like that to me would have been incredibly useful. So I do hope that, people resonate with the way that you frame that, because I think that's a very important shift, and something that we can work on kind of out of the box, as we're tuned into this conversation, after we're done listening to it. There's no barriers to entry in terms of cost or anything, right? This is something we can start trying to implement right away. And it's not going to be perfect, right? Like anything. But as long as we're aware that different ways that we can go about, sharing a response to the situation, whether it's with a little bit of that heat, or if we kind of mild it down a little bit and come from a more centered, grounded place, right? And it's interesting because as we've been talking about this is kind of like this connection has kind of been made to me, and tell me what you think about it. But I almost feel like this tendency to react, which is what I see. If I was to say majority minority, I would say majority of men that I've seen so far in my lived experience, they have a tendency to react to something, right? And I feel like sometimes when we think about Stoicism and we think about how we are, we're feeling we're supposed to be, right? We're just supposed to show this sort of cool, this unshakable cool all the time, right? It's kind of, it's not really in alignment, right? To react is not exactly stoic, right? Because, a stoic person, they're showing that cool, they're processing things, right? And I feel, in my experience, they're more likely to come with a response because they're factoring a lot of these things in. They're taking that time to check in with how does that align with my own personal principles? And, is there any sort of hypocrisy that lies in what happened here? And what feelings are coming up for me? You know what I mean? So I kind of feel that when we react, there's almost this, it's kind of weird because there's so many facets to it. I feel like as men, we feel like we're supposed to give a solution like right away, right? To take pause and to rest and be like, hey, I'll get back to you. That's kind of this, it's almost like this indication of weakness, or we don't have it all figured out, right? And so it's, to me, it's almost like, do we opt for a reaction because at least I'm giving you something in the moment and you're expecting me to be able to provide you with something, even though it's not the greatest. I'm still giving you something right in this moment, right? So I feel like we've kind of like jumbled up a few different things, confused what we ought to do, and we've kind of led with reactionary responses versus taking things in and processing them and coming out with that sort of cool response. Like, how does that land for you? I know that didn't come out all that perfectly. I'm still sorting through it, but do you resonate with any of that?
I do. And what's coming up for me is just like, I think that's in some ways what we're taught and what is almost celebrated in modern culture, right? Like, the answer.
Mm.
And if you know something, it's a reaction because it's right here. It's, I'm thinking of stick handling in hockey, but like there's something to watching a professional do something with their hands really quickly. And you're like, okay, I know that process, but when the puck comes to me, I can't do it. And because I don't have that reaction, I don't have that trained muscle memory, so to speak. And for me, I thought that I should always just have these things. I should be the answer to everything. So this idea of like, I don't know, I'm going to think about it for a moment and then I will respond, is like, that just in itself is uncomfortable for me because my egoic brain says, no, you're smart. You know the answer.
Yeah.
And I want to show everybody by, having the answer. I did okay in school, but I was never a great student because I wanted to pretend that I knew everything right away, but I actually didn't want to admit that I didn't know anything or go and do the work to find out what the answers were and come back later. And I think there's something to responding that is, it takes at least an internal admitting, like, no, my first instinct is not necessarily the right answer. Especially if I was taught at a younger age that something that is maybe not the best. I'm not going to say wrong, but there could be better ways or alternatives that I don't even know about. And if I always think I know the answer, I'll never get any of those.
Right.
Like, I'll never progress in that way. I think I kind of sidelined whatever you asked me. That's kind of where my brain went. So
yeah, no, that's perfect, man. No, I get where you're going with that, and I think it's important, and I think that's something that a lot of us do. We sometimes we just choose a path that we know, there's a better option for us, but for whatever reason, we've got some of that programming within us that kind of leads us down that way anyway. And, the important thing is that we catch it, right? And we become mindful of it and we make a decision because, once we're aware that we do this, right, then we're empowered to actually shift things and make some different decisions, right? So, and tying it all together, right? Like, do you feel from, like, I guess there's two parts here. From what you've observed, and maybe a personal opinion, if those two things are different, do you think that we still have a challenge in in looking at Stoicism as, and when we communicate feelings and emotions, right? Is that a betrayal of someone who maybe considers themselves to be stoic?
Um, I don't know if it's a betrayal. I think time and place are important.
Hmm.
And, one of the things that I'm recognizing is I can have a whole bunch of feelings. I can have a whole bunch of emotions. Who and how I disclose them is very important,
Right.
right? Like I don't necessarily need to tell my client that I don't, I'm scared about this and I'm angry about this and the guy didn't show up and like they don't need to know any of that.
Right.
What they need to know is like, I'm here. I'm going to help get through this. Like I will bring us through this area. Any concerns you have, come to me. I can receive them. I can talk to my buddy about how the guy next door pissed me off or whatever, but there's a time and place.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I've struggled with in my life is not knowing that there's a time and a place. Um, so when things boil over, they come out
Hmm.
to whoever is there versus, you know, throughout the day, week, month, year, whatever,
Yeah.
dealing with things as they arise, not in the moment, but in sometimes in the moment, but also sometimes in reflection and going like, hey, this stuff bothered me. Why did it bother me? Like,
Right. Hmm.
how do I bring peace to this situation for myself?
Yeah.
Like, what
Huh.
do I need to do?
Yeah. I like how you put that, man. And when it comes to time and place, and now that you're more versed in like, yeah, there is a time and place for these things, right? In sort of reverse engineering the whole thing, right? What do you think that we as men, with us, doing some work on ourselves and really trying to show up differently in the world and whatnot, right? Is there something that you think, maybe the men in your life could have shared with you sooner or said to you that would have helped you really make that connection between, hey, it's not that I need to be a brick wall with no feelings. It's more just that there is a time and place. Like, did you feel that you had some of those brothers and friends around you who you could actually communicate that stuff with? Or was it just like, hey, I feel like I got nobody, so it's bottled up and it just comes out whenever it comes out?
Um, I'm not sure, to be honest. Like, if I know some of the people I had back then and some of the people I have now, and they're the same people.
Mm.
And I now feel like I could go to them with something, whereas before I don't know if I could have.
Mm.
And part of that tells me is that was mostly inside me, right? It's not necessarily that they weren't capable; it's that I wasn't capable.
I hear you.
Uh, and why that is a product of raising of some degree. It's not anybody's fault. It's a learned behavior on some level, I think.
Yeah.
I always get to add my own special quirks to things. Um, I I think of relationships with my dad or with my grandfather, and there is something to like not talking about what's going on outside of I'm angry, outside of this person bothered me, outside of what is the right thing to do.
Mm.
And so breaking, conversations kind of like this of just breaking down the struggle of like, how do you actually arrive at decisions? How do you check in with what's going on inside of you? Do you have people that you feel okay to at least express like this bothered me or this thing scares me or like all of that is important to actually be able to process versus what I learned not necessarily from my family or anything but because it worked was just run from it, just shove it in a corner where then it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
um and that's still something I'm unlearning, like it's a again practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hear you. And, I resonate with a lot of what you're saying there, man. Something that I've reflected upon in the last few years, especially, is that, I lacked feeling that I had like a safe space, be that among friends or family, whatever, to really communicate my feelings. And, what I found is that it wasn't about them not being, say, present or there in numbers, but there was something within me that was blocking it. It's like I almost, like, I guess, I don't know, deep down, if I think about it, it's like maybe I didn't think that they had the capacity to be there for me. Or maybe I thought that I would come across as a burden. They've got their own life. We're all going through life. Like, what makes me so special? So I guess I'll keep it to myself. And I prevented building a lot of intimacy with people. When I say intimacy, this is not sexual, anybody who's listening. This is about closeness, like a sense of closeness and trust and all of that safety, right? I didn't give them a chance to prove me wrong. And what I've realized in conversation now that I've reflected back and I still have some of these people present, thankfully, why they stuck around, I'm so grateful to them, but I didn't give them a reason to stick around, if you will. But, now it's like, yeah, I really wanted to be there for you. I wish I knew that was going on with you, right? Because you're always there for me, and I feel like I can never be there for you, right? So it's kind of like, I think sometimes we get it in our heads too much that we just need to be one thing, right? And some of the ways that people want to show us that they love us is to be there for us. And I find that this dynamic is especially at play in a relationship, right? Like with a girlfriend, a partner. Sometimes we get stuck in this place where we just think, you know what, no, I need to be this strong presence in this relationship. I'll deal with this another way. I'll go lift some weights. She doesn't need to get bothered by this. She needs to just trust that I'm strong and I'm good. And, the more I started to actually communicate the things that my partner was already picking up energetically and between the lines of words unsaid, it's like, finally, thank you for realizing what I've realized, right? And I just want to be here for you, you
Yeah,
know?
I get that. What was coming through for me is also just the idea of like somewhere along the way, I tried to open up to somebody, and for whatever was going on in that moment,
Yeah.
it wasn't received well. It was, they were focused on something else. They had other things on their mind, and I internalized of like, I can never do this,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, oh, this happened one time. Now this is a completely unsafe act that for the next 32 years of my life,
Yep.
I held until I went and shared it. And when I was like, oh, there is a safe place for this. And all of a sudden it was like, what, why did I never do this before now?
Yeah.
And, just the fact that I did it once does not mean that that whole thing gets erased, unfortunately. And now it is a practice of like, oh shit, I got to talk to someone. Like, and for me, there is usually pain that is associated with that
Mm.
and discomfort before I'm actually willing to reach out and, connect with whatever friend of mine to go like, I'm going through this and I know you've been through this. I know, or you haven't, but like whatever it is,
Yeah.
put things out there to get a perspective that's outside of mine because I might be like, I might think I have all the answers, but I don't. And if I'm willing to admit that, I can usually find a better perspective with
Yeah.
other people or just with myself.
Hmm. I love that. I love that share, man. And I totally resonate to like one thing happening and it's like all of a sudden that's like how everything has to be from that point. And a story that is alive for me when you mentioned that is with my dad. I still remember, super, super small, just in the playground, going around, on my bike, and I fall off my bike and I scrape my knee and I'm crying. I want my dad. My dad comes and my dad's standing over me. And like I see, like as little as I was, I saw this internal conflict within him. It's like, okay, do I like acknowledge the fact that he's crying right now, or do I give him some of that toughen up kind of stuff? And my dad opted verbally to go for the toughen up stuff, but physically, I saw the pain in his eyes. It's like it was a betrayal of himself to do that to me, right? And so it really speaks to what you shared because it's like in those moments where I felt now I need to close off or now this action is no longer acceptable. I found that it's actually happened as a result of an interaction for someone who could have actually also benefited from feeling like they could express something too.
Can you elaborate on that?
So like my dad, for example, in that situation, right? He was always told like, you're too sensitive, right? Like, toughen up, like be a man, all those kind of things. So for him, it was like, oh, now he's communicating this message that's been hammered home to him as much as he's out of alignment with it to me because he thinks, oh, I guess these guys are right. Like, I guess everyone else was right and I got it wrong, right? But at the end of the day, he's communicating something that itself caused him pain, right? But he really could have used that safe space for someone to be like, "Oh no, hey, that's okay. Let's talk. Let's talk. What's bothering you today? Like, what's going on?" Like he could have really benefited from that. And it's not until now, if even now, he feels that he can do that. Still very closed off. Not really open with the emotions flowing and all that kind of stuff. But I see this pattern kind of. It's a very common pattern that I see repeated out there. And when I get to the heart of it, when I talk to folks, it's like everyone's just hurting and everyone's kind of just, thinking that that firm, tough, stoic, if we want to call it, approach is the right one and they did it wrong. So let me give you what the right advice is, even if, that doesn't feel good to me kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. I think that's where it comes back to a time and a place again. I've been fortunate enough that like I have time and resources to like look and see what's coming up and notice and observe and then like be able to reach out to somebody or whatever. But that is in some ways like a luxury that was not afforded to everybody today, right, or back then. And I'm often not reminded of that. And that's something I guess I'm grateful for, to be honest. But or I'm grateful that I have that luxury. And I think one of the things that I'm reminded of. There was this look of like a calm, stoic, Marlboro manly man that existed, and that was the epitome of masculinity at some point. Mm-hmm. And I think that has slowly faded away and was replaced by somebody who's all driven by like an artist and emotional, in his feelings, always in his feelings. And that was like a major course correction the other side. And now it's, for me at least, in the men's work that I'm most interested in, is like merging of those two things. Like how do you be an emotional, loving person? How do you be a calm, stoic person who's got drive and all this, and show up as this like fully embodied version of yourself, not a scared little boy, not somebody who's running away from everything, not somebody who is only driven for the next thing of more and more and more.
Right.
But yeah, when I was thinking about that idea, I was reminded I was touring some sort of war museum or something. Mm-hmm. And I imagined like there was a bunker and I sat in the bunker and I was like, this would be scary as fuck. Like I never had to do anything like that, thankfully. But I was like, there's so much fear that comes up in all of this. And like that, if you were actually on the front lines in a war, that is not the time and place to sit and have a talk about that. Right. And that's the whole, like, that's how I'm just putting this together. But that's where post-traumatic stress comes from, because you couldn't deal with anything then. And then you come back and you have to unravel all of that stuff that was shoved in a corner, essentially. So that you could show up how somebody else was telling you to show up. I guess that's kind of just trauma in a nutshell, right? Like you shoved whatever in the corner, and now you have to deal with that at some level, or you don't have to. Could maybe it would be beneficial, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. Before it deals with us fully, right?
Yeah.
So, something I want to chat with you about, man, is toxic masculinity, right? This term, and it's been around it's popularized in the last few years, of course. And, it's always interesting when the term comes up, because it's come up in boardrooms, it's come up in living rooms, bedrooms, all this kind of stuff. And I always like have more questions than answers, if you will, like when people's eyebrows raise and, you can just feel the vibe shift. And, where I want to start with this really is, I often see that toxic masculinity is a term or collection of thoughts that are defined and shared by women. I never really hear men talk about toxic masculinity or define it for themselves. I find they kind of just try to firefight and respond to what's thrown their way. But I never see them kind of at the helm of the discussion. So I'm curious, if you were to talk about toxic masculinity from a male perspective, what is it to you? Like, how does it present in the world? What does it look like? What does it feel like?
Uh, um, I'm not sure. I think what immediately comes up for me is like it is a way to cast shame.
Mm,
And for me, like any other way of casting shame, I understand why it exists. It can have people change actions, but it has a whole bunch of negative consequences or alternative things that happen as a result of that, right? Like if you tell somebody some part of them is not good, um, they're going to internalize that. And, shame is just this vortex of, I don't know, things spiral, at least for me. Like anything that I have shame around, as soon as it touches it, I'm reactive. I'm blaming others. I'm pointing fingers because I don't want to feel it.
mm,
Um, and so for me, that's what comes up is I understand that there's a purpose to pointing the shame because you don't like certain behaviors. Um, but maybe it would be better to talk about these behaviors as a one-off versus
mm,
kind of getting them or simply labeling them as toxic.
mm.
I think it's just such an easy way to cast something aside and not give it any more depth, empathy, or care than I don't like it and you shouldn't do it.
Mm.
Um, you know, so I don't know exactly how to define it. I would define it loosely because I think it's used very loosely
Yeah.
as a group of behaviors that are seen as masculine, but maybe not presented in the best ways or not fully embodied. And there's a dark element of whatever that action is
Mm,
that
mm.
isn't, realized or connected with.
Yeah.
Because I think, when I think of toxic masculinity, I think of control and power and these types of things, and or wanting to keep, like, when I say control and power, dominance in some ways, like all of that. And
Mhm.
I think those are masculine, those can be masculine energies. Not so much control, but power certainly could be. Um, but there's something driving that is not, that is from a place of shame, essentially.
Mm.
And that's where the labeling it in such a way, I feel like, just reinforces that and causes a downward spiral at the end of the day. It's not about actually getting better or helping those people. It's about telling them to not do what they're doing and that they're shitty because they did it.
Yeah.
They're shitty because they've done it, right? Like, and it doesn't, like, yeah, that's how I feel about it. Again, I haven't been on the victim or the receiving side of some of these things to the same degree.
Mhm.
So I can understand why somebody would want to be quick to just say stop fucking doing it.
Yeah.
'Cause we probably should stop doing it. But
Mm.
why don't we look at why it's being done and how do we actually
Yeah.
overcome that and heal so that it's not this thing in the background. And
Yeah.
that takes work and care and effort, and I'd rather just run from it. So that's what I'm doing.
I hear I hear you, man.
I'm talking now. That's how I see it, at least. So,
Yeah. No, and
um,
I appreciate that. And, I agree with a lot of what you're saying there. And, I think that it's right. It's true. Like when we toss around the term, oftentimes it more shuts down a conversation versus it opens it up for further exploration. You know, it's kind of like I notice like the guys are like they kind of like look around the room and it's like, shoot, I guess I can't say anything despite how incorrect I feel about what was just said. It's like it's just that's what I notice happens.
Yeah, but yeah,
And
what comes up for me is like I don't like if I say the wrong thing, I'm gonna be part of this cancel culture,
yep,
like fucking pitchfork, like mob that's coming after me, and I part of me is fearful of that, and part of me is like I'm a human and I'm allowed to make mistakes. Like if you want to help me, help me. If not, you're just equally part of the problem. Like you can't. Yeah.
yeah, and I see a lot of us resonate with what you're saying there, man. Because like something like for example, when I would be walking and when I worked in a corporate setting, it'd be in like office buildings and stuff like that. If I see some people coming behind me, I'd likely hold open the door, right? And I was having some interesting conversations with some men around holding the door open, and it was like, okay, I didn't realize this was actually a subject to enter a conversation around, but sure, let's do it. And so, what they started to express to me is that with the how present this term toxic masculinity is and how much under fire masculinity seems to be without the intention of course correcting, more just like we want to just beat this thing with a stick right now. What I found is like they actually start to tell me stuff like the cancel culture, and they're like, I don't want to be perceived as this guy who just thinks he's better than everyone, so he's holding the door open for them, and like they start to tell me like, they start to have challenges around, I am a mindful masculine. I'm just being a gentleman. This is just part of who I am. I would open the door for somebody, but now they're hesitating because now they've been on this receiving end of a microscopic like examination of every action, every word, that is like, I guess I'll just cocoon.
Or I'll slam the door on the old lady is what's coming up for me. I'm like, what is the alternative here?
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know. Like, I think of slamming the door on the old lady, but I also think of like, following my girlfriend up the stairs and smacking her ass. So like, I don't know. Like, I can see how both of them, or given the energy behind them, something, and that's where, like, given the energy and the thought and the whatever is coming up at, like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
And that's again when I think of toxic masculinity, there's no question of why. It's a label.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is driving that? Because there are some things that are driving things that I think are healthy and are the embodiment of who I would like to be.
Yeah.
And there's the same action, the same opening the door, and there's a whole lot of gross things that can be involved in that.
Yep.
And the why is more important for me in that, like the lens of what's going on for that person, what is the intention,
Yeah.
what's driving it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, which is
Yeah.
always difficult. It's difficult to do because it takes curiosity and time, right? Which is
Yeah.
an exchange of energy that is not always available or wanted to invest, I suppose.
Yeah, it's true. And like I think that one of the ways that we'll be able to actually shift some things and really open up the conversation around, these different actions that now everyone is thinking two times, three times before they do it, is for conversations like the one we're having right now, where two guys are talking a bit about it, right? Because like we even get into scenarios like one that I know is incredibly memed a lot, is the idea of deciding where to go for dinner, right? So, for example, back in the day, the attitude that seemed to be really wanted or seen as masculine is he's going to make the reservation, he's going to drive us there, he's going to pay, all of that stuff is not something that he really looks for input on, right? But now, I think, a lot of men have become so paralyzed and fearful of making any kind of decision because like, oh no, then I'm going to be perceived as asserting my authority over another person. I took away their right to choose what they wanted to eat tonight. And now I don't want to get canceled. So I guess it's just easier for me to quiet down, not have an opinion, and wait for me to be told, what the acceptable action or decision is. That's what I find is happening a lot, to be honest with you.
Uh, okay. Um, I've been both of those guys. Um, to be honest, the second one to me is one that is more driven by fear and shame and insecurity than the other.
Mm.
Uh, Most of the time, if I'm making a decision, it is with all of the information that I already carry about my partner
Yeah.
and or about the situation. And I'm not just thinking, if the, if I was bringing her out for sushi and she doesn't like sushi, but I do, okay, I can get where some of that is. Like if the only options available for her are something that she doesn't like, that's pretty shitty. And that's
Yeah.
obviously selfish and manipulative and all the rest of it. But for me, for most of the people I know, um, there is something to this masculine, feminine energy stuff. I hope you can find a way to play in both.
Hmm.
Uh, and for the most part, if I make a reservation, if I book a dinner, if I pick out something that I would want her to even wear, that's going to be received well, unless there are things that I didn't take into account. And I have to be willing to say, oh, I didn't know that and course correct,
Hmm.
or admit that I missed something,
Right.
right? Like that might all sound great until I know she's had a shitty day. And all of a
Hmm.
sudden, maybe you don't want to go out and be nice in a nice restaurant and you want to wear sweats and do whatever. Like, you got to have some flexibility. And that's, I guess, the decision making is the masculine side of it. And then the flexibility side is like a feminine energy of like, oh, there's some flow and some intuitiveness that needs to be brought into this.
Yeah. Understood.
Uh, yeah, I'm still kind of I've never heard this holding the door open example.
Yeah,
And
it's a very recent one that I heard, and I
like
was like, "You got to be joking with me right now! Like, no way that this is actually a thing people second guess now."
like, yeah, because I also hold the door open for men, so I don't. I could see. I guess I could see. I could see a shadowy, dark side to why somebody might hold the door open for somebody. I think for the most part, and this is like I don't 90-10. Like I don't know what the number is, but I'm gonna try not to get too caught up in that because
Yeah,
that's just bring more fear into my life, and there's
I
enough
hear you.
reason to be fearful without making new ones.
100%. I mean, if I go to hell because I held the door open for somebody, I guess that's just a chance that I got to take at this point because there's not all of us have impure intentions behind everything, right? So I appreciate how you shared on that, man. I think that's very real and authentic. So thank you for that. I want to shift gears a little bit, to you as an entrepreneur, right? Having your own business now. Do you have a team with you, or is it a solo venture at the moment?
It's just me. I got a couple of guys I use for subs, and some contractors and friends that I know who help me out from time to time.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, where do you want to go with this? This is like you
Yeah,
want. I got enough fear. I got enough things that I'm worried about.
yeah,
Um, try to be kind, be honest, and let's
yeah,
face the real fears that I choose to take on, I suppose.
for sure, man. Yeah. I was just curious, as an entrepreneur, in living life through that lens now, right?
Mhm.
are there certain things that you've added to your practices to make sure that you're feeling good and you're in your highest sort of power on as a consistent basis as possible? And where I ask this from is, being an entrepreneur myself, interacting with lots of entrepreneurs, we got to grind, right? We make these very long sprints to get to certain targets and all that kind of stuff. And, sometimes we just sort of accept that as part of the path. And we might think of, taking care of ourselves or putting some things in to support us along the way. We might think about that as an afterthought. So I'm just curious, has being in this role of an entrepreneur now, has that shifted how you think about it? Even if you thought about, what would I make available, if anything, to my staff if I open myself up to having a formal team at some point? How has that shifted how you look at mental health and what you offer and embrace yourself?
There's a lot there. I'll start. I would say the shift into entrepreneurship was the result of feeling like there was more to life than grinding.
Mm.
I used to pride myself on working long weeks, long hours, working hard. And there's something about that felt never ending.
Mm.
And it still feels that way sometimes in my own business, but there's more upside, I suppose.
Right.
So for me, the shift started when, I couldn't come with the same passion and integrity. I couldn't come with the same passion and care to my work because it felt never ending.
Yeah.
It, like, no, it didn't necessarily matter if the passion and care was there. It was a cog in the wheel. The ship keeps moving forward. Your job is to push it forward. And there was some shifts in economics that started to happen, and some of the responses were to tighten belts and cut corners or look the
Mm.
other way on missed things or not spend the extra money to do something properly. And these are very minor things, but each one of them hurt in some way.
Yeah.
And eventually decided that I needed something different and more myself. This idea of grinding for me, again, there's a time and a place. You want to work some long hours, you want to put in long weeks, awesome. I don't think for me that is a 50-week a year type life.
Gotcha. Yeah.
It's not even a 48 week type life. So trying to find ways that more connected or balanced some of the working hard with, having the luxury of time, of freedom, was a choice and a payoff for me. I think I would like to be able to extend that to my employees or to guys I work with. It's also how you set up the rest of your life, because on the other side of that time thing is money, right? Like, those are both forms of freedom. Ideally, you can hit, I have friends who went into career paths and chose jobs who they have time freedom and they have excess money, and their life looks pretty sweet, right?
Right.
Like, they have both of these excesses, and that's awesome.
Mm.
It can also be dangerous as a man, but it can also be awesome.
Yeah.
For me, part of that balance, so to speak, is I'll take a little bit more time for a little bit less money. Was kind of the first, being willing to do that and setting up my life in a way to be willing to do that.
Mm.
Really the first step into being able to go I will try to do this for myself, because I don't need to make the exact same income I was making before.
Right.
I can get some of these other things.
I like that.
And the hope is to obviously grow the income and grow the business. But it's never, my hope is to never be working 50-hour weeks, 50 weeks a year. That's not
Yeah.
an aspiration I have any longer. It was at one point.
Mm.
I wear that like a badge of honor in some ways. I find fulfillment in building things, in using my hands, and using my brain to figure out how materials can come together. I do genuinely enjoy that.
Mm.
I also enjoy sitting on a beach I also enjoy hiking in nature, going out for dinner, or, you know, hopefully going to kids' sporting events and like all of these types of things.
Right.
And those are also things that I am trying to build room for in my life. Um, so that
I
would
love that.
be a step into why I'm where I am.
Yeah.
Uh, there's more upside. There's a hell of a lot of risk. There is fear with where the next paycheck comes from. Again, I have addictive tendencies, so in some ways that's just more. Whatever it is, I want more. If it's good, I want more. So money's one of those too. Though. Like it's a
Yeah. No, I appreciate you sharing that, man, because that's a unique insight, and I think that that's something that a lot of folks are going to really resonate. I resonate with a lot of what you're sharing there. To make choices for the things that are going to really just feel far more aligned for you, so that you can actually keep going and doing other things in life too, not just the work and the hustle, get a paycheck, and then go into the ground, right? I think a lot of
have some more expensive meal, the nicer car. Like I like some luxuries.
yeah,
I like fancy things. I also like very simple things. Um, and I like to move a little slower sometimes. And I'm trying to figure out how to do more with that.
but I think that's very inspirational, man. I'm very inspired by you sharing that. So thank you. I think that's going to lead to continued shifts in my own life. In just being able to, move at a pace that really feels good to me versus forcing myself to move faster than feels good. So thank you for that. I know we're approaching time, and I have a couple more questions for you, if you don't mind. And one of them is, what's the best piece of advice you think you could share with a man who's struggling to really connect with, tap into, and champion his mental health?
Um, reach out, I guess. Like there's a plethora of things that exist. Keep an open mind, reach out to people. People will point you in the right direction. You're not alone. Like I think as men, we think we have to shoulder everything alone. Um, you know, the pencil analogy of like, do you know how to build a pencil? Because I don't know how to mine for coal and cut down a tree and create a processing plant and all of these things. And it takes a tribe, it takes a village,
Mhm.
it takes a community. Yeah.
That's wonderful advice, man. Wonderful advice. That's going to definitely support some of the folks out there. So I just want to thank you so much for your time today. I think I got a lot of this conversation. I'm hoping that our community who's tuned in and who's going to catch the replay, I know that they're going to get a lot out of this. This has been a very real and pure and authentic conversation. So I thank you for that, man. And I'm super happy to hear that you're loving the life that you're building and living in real time, man. That's one of the best things that I can ever hear. So I'm so glad and happy for you and your whole ecosystem who gets to benefit from you feeling that way. So, could you just share with, everyone who is tuning into this, how they can connect with you, why they would want to connect with you, and also what the Brendan difference is? I really want to spotlight your excellence so that, the people who do tune in can really connect with someone who they feel good about. So, take it away, man.
Uh, I'm stumped on the difference. You know, I don't know what the difference is. I'm here. Like I'm trying. I'm here. I'm usually fairly honest, and I am doing my best to be the authentic version of me. Um, why you might want to connect with me if you're struggling, reach out. I'm happy to help. I'm happy to give you some resources or just shoulder a little bit of whatever the fuck is bothering you or burdening you. Other than that, if you are passionate about building, more sustainable, more affordable housing, those types of things, I love having conversations about that. I work in the area. I'll say GTA, but north of the GTA, I try not to go into the city. If you need work done, awesome. If you're in the trades and you're looking for work, maybe I can help you. Yeah, if you're struggling, if you just want to say hi, reach out.
Awesome, man.
I get
And for your business, is there does it have its own account, or is there a website, or what's the best way for people to connect with you about work?
uh, I would say my phone number, but that seems a little strange for the medium.
Yeah.
Um, I have a website. It's sustainableshelters.ca. I have an email that is info@sustainableshelters.ca. I have an Instagram account that I made. I would say reach me out to me on this one because I haven't done much with it. It's one of the things I keep procrastinating on and is always at the top of my to-do list that never gets done.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that, man. And, to everyone who took the time to join us today for this conversation, jump in the comments and whatnot, we really appreciate you. And if there are any questions that come to your mind as you're watching this back, as you sit with the recording a little bit, if you have anything that you want to ask us, just reach on up. We both want to make ourselves accessible to you. And, once again, thank you all. Brendan, thank you, man. Cheering for you all the way from a distance, man. And, next time I'm in town, definitely would love to catch up with you, bro. So,
Thank
all
All
righty.
right.
Well, everyone take care, and until next time.
Have a good one, guys.
You too.
And thanks.